The ground shook before I heard the engines. That first tremor rattled the stew pot in my hands, and I nearly dropped it into the fire. Every head in the market square turned toward the sky at once, and I watched 300 faces go pale in the same second. Nobody had told me the tax ship would arrive early. Nobody had told me it would arrive at all this cycle, not with the eastern fields still black from the blight. I set the pot down slowly, my heart already hammering, and I stepped out from behind the cooking fire to see the shape breaking through the low clouds. It was massive, dark as wet stone, and it moved with a silence that felt worse than any roar could have. The smell hit next, sweet and burnt at the same time, curling into my throat and making my eyes water. I had smelled that exact scent once before, on the day my shuttle went down over this world, and it had meant nothing but trouble then too. Oliver, the village headman, was already running toward me across the square, his ledger clutched to his chest like it might shield him from what was coming. "Ethan!" he said, breathless. They were not due for another 2 weeks. The harvest is not ready. The tally is not ready. Nothing is ready. I did not have an answer for him. I only had the sinking feeling that something about this visit was different from the routine collections we had endured before. Those ships usually sent a junior officer, someone bored and efficient, someone who weighed the grain, took the cut, and left before dinner. This ship was bigger than any collector I had seen touch down in this valley. It did not look bored. It looked like it had come with a purpose. The cruiser settled into the dry paddock just beyond the village gate, crushing the fence line flat under its weight, and the ramp lowered with a hiss that silenced every voice in the crowd. I felt Oliver's hand grip my arm, hard enough to bruise, and I understood without him saying a word that he wanted me to disappear into the crowd and let him handle this alone. I did not move. The figure that stepped down the ramp was taller than anyone I had ever stood near, plated in dark, glossy armor that looked grown rather than built. 4 eyes swept the crowd in a single motion, missing nothing, and a voice came out of a collar at her throat, layered and strange, like 3 people speaking a half-breath apart from each other. "Village Administrator," she said. "Present the harvest tally." Oliver's hands shook so badly the ledger nearly slipped from his fingers. He stepped forward anyway, because that was his duty, because refusing to step forward meant someone else would pay a worse price for his hesitation. "The tally is short, Your Eminence," he said. "The eastern fields were struck by blight 3 months ago. We have perhaps 60% of a normal yield this cycle." Something in the way she went still told me the number displeased her before she even spoke again. "The Empire does not renegotiate for weather," she said. 40% of the total yield is owed, regardless of cause. I did the math faster than I wanted to. 40% of 60 left this village with barely a third of what it needed to survive a valley winter. Children would go hungry first, then the elders, then everyone. I had watched hunger work through a village slowly before, in the weeks after my shuttle crashed, before I understood how close to the edge these people already lived even in a good year. I felt the old anger rise in my chest, the same anger that had gotten me labeled a troublemaker back on the ship I used to serve on. The anger that made me open my mouth when staying silent would have been so much easier. I stepped past Oliver before he could stop me, the ladle from the stew pot still in my hand, steam rising off the grain and roots I had been cooking all morning for anyone hungry enough to want it. One of the 4 eyes turned toward me immediately, sharp and assessing, and I felt the weight of that attention like a hand pressing against my chest. "What is that?" she asked, and there was no curiosity in the question, only suspicion. "Lunch," I said. I heard Oliver make a small strangled sound behind me. 2 of her guards shifted their weight, plates on their arms clicking together in a way that made every hair on my neck rise, but she did not signal them to move. She only watched me with all 4 eyes at once, as if trying to work out what kind of threat I might be disguising as an offer of food. "You bring the tax collector a meal," she said slowly. "I bring a hungry-looking person a bowl of stew," I said. "You are the one who decided that comes with a tax bill attached." I heard someone in the crowd gasp, and somewhere behind me, a woman named Grace whispered my name like a warning. I did not look back. I kept my eyes on the Queen, because looking away first felt like the kind of mistake I would not get a second chance to fix. "I am not hungry," she said. "I am Vosterai." You are standing in a village that is about to spend the winter with a third of its food, telling them the weather does not matter, and you are confused about why I think everyone deserves to eat, including you, I said. That tracks, in a strange sort of way. One of the guards started forward at that, his hand moving towards something at his hip that I did not want to look at too closely. She raised 3 fingers without turning her head, and he stopped instantly, freezing mid-stride like a puppet whose strings had gone slack. You are not native to this world, she said. It was not a question. No, I said. Then why do you feed creatures that are not your own kind? She asked. I could feel every person in the square holding their breath, waiting to see what I would say, waiting to see if my next words would decide whether this cycle ended with a shortage or ended with something far worse. I thought about giving her some grand speech, the kind I used to rehearse in my head during long nights after the crash, about unity and shared worlds and the responsibility of the strong to the weak. Standing there with steam rising off the ladle and her 4 eyes fixed on my face, none of that felt true enough to say out loud. Because I was there once when the food ran out, and nobody came to help, I said, and I decided a long time ago that I never wanted to be the reason that happens to someone else. That is the whole reason. It is not complicated. You just have to look at the people standing in front of you, instead of the number written in your ledger. The silence that followed felt longer than it probably was. I watched her weight shift slightly, the plates along her shoulders catching the gray afternoon light, and for a moment, I genuinely believed I had said the wrong thing, that my next breath might be my last one on this world. Then, without any warning at all, she reached out and took the bowl from my hands. She did not eat from it. I do not know if her body could process grain and root the way mine could. She only turned the bowl slightly, watching the steam curl upward, studying it, the way someone studies evidence at a trial they did not expect to be attending. The collectors who came before me report yield, she said quietly. Nothing else. I did not know this village was starving. I understood only that it was short. Those are not the same thing, I said. No, she agreed, they are not. She set the bowl down carefully on the broken fence rail, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, though I could not have explained exactly how. Revised assessment, she said, turning to Oliver. This cycle, no collection is owed. The blight will be recorded as a regional loss, not a village failure. Seed stock will be delivered from the northern depot before the season turns. Oliver stared at her, his mouth open, the ledger forgotten in his hands. Your Eminence, he stammered. We are grateful, truly, but I must ask, is this permitted under Empire law? I am the law in this sector, until someone above me says otherwise, she said, and I say otherwise nothing today. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she would turn, walk back up that ramp, and disappear into the clouds the way every collector before her had, leaving us with nothing but relief and a strange story to tell for cycles to come. Instead, she turned back toward me, and something in her posture told me the conversation was not finished. Walk with me, she said. It was not a request. Oliver's hand found my arm again, this time not to pull me back but to steady himself, as if my walking away might undo whatever fragile grace she had just extended to the village. I gave him a small nod, the kind that meant I would be careful, though I had no idea if that promise was one I could actually keep. We walked toward the edge of the paddock, past the broken fence, far enough that the crowd's murmuring faded into background noise. Her guards followed at a distance, close enough to react, far enough to give the impression of privacy. You risked a great deal back there, she said. Do you understand what would have happened if I had chosen differently? I understand, I said. I decided it was worth the risk anyway. Why? She asked. You are not required to protect these people. You are not even the same species. I thought about the first week after the crash, wandering the edge of the valley with a broken transmitter, and no idea if anyone would ever come looking for me. I thought about the family that found me half frozen near the tree line and carried me back to Hollow Creek without asking what I could offer them in return. I thought about every meal I had eaten at their table since, every hand that had helped me repair my shuttle parts into irrigation lines, every child who had taught me the names of the local grains in exchange for stories about the stars. They did not ask what I was before they helped me, I said. I do not see why I should ask what they are before I help them. She was quiet for a long moment, walking beside me with a gait that made the ground tremble faintly under each step. I found myself studying her, the way she had studied the bowl of stew, trying to understand the shape of a creature I had assumed, until that morning, would only ever be an enemy. "Do you know what happens to collectors who deviate from assessed totals without proper cause?" she asked eventually. I did not, I admitted. "Neither do most of them. Until it happens," she said. "There is a reason my predecessors never asked the question you forced me to ask today. It is safer, for us, to only see numbers." "Is that what you want?" I asked. "To only see numbers." She stopped walking, and for the first time since she had stepped off that ramp, all four of her eyes settled on me at once, unmoving, unreadable. "I do not know what I want," she said. "I know only what I have always done. Today you gave me a reason to wonder if there might be another way to do it." A shout rose from somewhere back near the village gate before I could answer her. I turned in time to see a younger guard, one who had stayed near the ship the entire time, sprinting toward us with something clutched in his hand. My stomach dropped, certain that whatever fragile peace we had built in the last few minutes was about to collapse. "Your Eminence," the guard called out, breathless. "A transmission has come through from the regional command post. They are requesting confirmation of this cycle's collection totals before the hour is finished." I felt Oliver go rigid beside me, though I had not even noticed him following us across the field. The Queen's posture shifted, something tightening across her shoulders that I recognized instantly, because I had felt that same tension in my own body more times than I could count during the crash and the long, hungry weeks afterward. "They want the number now," she said, more to herself than to any of us. "What happens if you give them the true number?" I asked. "The one that reflects the blight, not the one they expect." "They will send someone to verify it," she said. "And if they believe I falsified the report to spare a village that means nothing to the Empire, they will not simply correct my error. They will replace me, and whoever replaces me will collect double from this valley to make an example of what happens when a collector shows mercy." The words settled over the field like a weight pressing down on all of us. I understood, in that moment, that the danger had not passed at all. It had only changed shape, moving from a threat against Hollow Creek to a threat against the one person who had just decided the village deserved better. "Then tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them exactly what you saw here. Not mercy, evidence." She turned to face me fully. "Explain," she said. "You said it yourself. The collectors before you only report yield," I said. "What if this time the report includes more than a number? What if it includes the blight records, the soil samples, the actual condition of the eastern fields? Numbers without context invite suspicion. Numbers with proof invite understanding, at least from anyone who is not looking for an excuse to punish you." Oliver, still pale but steadier now, stepped forward. "I have soil records," he said quickly. "From the agricultural survey 3 months ago, before the blight spread. I can show exactly how much of the eastern fields were lost and why. It is all documented, dates and measurements both." The Queen looked between the two of us, and I watched something shift behind those 4 eyes, a calculation running that I could not follow but could see the shape of, the same way you can see the shadow of a large creature moving beneath still water. "Bring me the records," she said to Oliver, "now." He turned and ran back toward the village without another word, his ledger flapping against his chest, and for a long moment, the 3 of us stood in that broken paddock in silence, waiting. "I do not know why I am trusting a stranger's advice over instincts built across many cycles of service," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Maybe because instinct has only ever told you to protect yourself," I said. "And today you are trying something different." She did not answer that. She simply waited, watching the village gate, until Oliver came sprinting back with a thick folder of records clutched against him, papers threatening to spill loose with every stride. He handed them over without a word, chest heaving, and she took them the same careful way she had taken the bowl of stew earlier, as if handling something more fragile than it appeared. She spent several long minutes reviewing the pages, her guards standing motionless around us, the whole village watching from a cautious distance near the gate. I found myself holding my breath along with everyone else, unsure what outcome I was even hoping for beyond the simple, desperate wish that no one in Hollow Creek would suffer for what had happened here today. Finally, she looked up. "This is thorough," she said. "More thorough than most administrators bother to keep. We learned to keep good records after the first bad harvest cost us a headman," Oliver said quietly. It seemed wiser to have proof, in case anyone ever asked for it. She turned back toward the guard still waiting nearby. "Transmit the full record to command," she said. "Yield tally, blight documentation, soil samples, all of it. Tell them the assessment stands as revised, and that the evidence is attached for review." The guard hesitated only a moment before nodding and hurrying back toward the ship. I felt the tension in my chest loosen slightly, though I knew the danger was not entirely gone. Not until we heard back from whoever sat above her in that chain of command I did not fully understand. "We will know within the hour whether this was wisdom or foolishness," she said, watching the guard disappear up the ramp. "Either way," I said, "the truth is on record now. That has to count for something." "It should," she said. "Whether it will is a different question." We waited together near the fence line as the sun crept lower, the village slowly returning to its usual rhythm around us. Though every so often I caught someone glancing our way, unable to fully believe the tax ship was still sitting quietly in the paddock, instead of lifting off with half our winter stores in its hold. Grace brought out a second pot of stew without being asked, setting it near the fire for anyone who wanted a bowl while we waited, and I noticed the Queen watching that small act with an expression I could not fully name. When the transmission finally came back, nearly an hour later exactly as she had predicted, the guard returned at a jog, a data slate held out in front of him like an offering. "Command has reviewed the documentation," he said. "The revised assessment is accepted. No penalty has been issued." I felt the breath leave my body all at once, relief washing through me so suddenly that my knees nearly buckled. Beside me, Oliver made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and behind us, I heard the murmur of the crowd rising into something closer to disbelief than celebration, as if no one quite trusted the news to be real yet. The Queen studied the data slate for a long moment before handing it back to her guard. "It seems your suggestion held," she said, turning to me. "It seems it did," I agreed. She looked out over the village one more time, at the fire, at the pot of stew, at Grace ladling out bowls to a line of children who had gathered without anyone telling them to. "I will return next cycle," she said. "Not to collect, to review the harvest properly, with full documentation, the way it should have been done from the beginning." "That sounds like progress," I said. "It sounds like more work," she said, though something in her tone made it clear that was not entirely a complaint. She turned to walk back toward the ramp, then paused and looked back at me one final time. "I never asked your name," she said. "Ethan," I told her. She repeated it once, quietly, as if testing the shape of the word. "I do not know what you are to your own people, Ethan," she said, "but you may have just changed what I am to mine." She walked up the ramp without waiting for a response, and the ship lifted off minutes later, engines shaking the ground one final time before it climbed back into the clouds and vanished. The sweet, burnt smell lingered in the air long after the sound had faded, but for the first time since I had smelled it, it did not feel like the beginning of something terrible. Around the village they started calling her the Queen who listened, and the story grew a little with every retelling, the way these things always do. But I remember it simply. I remember a bowl of stew, a question I almost did not answer honestly, and a choice that could have gone very differently if either of us had flinched first. Hunger does not ask what world you were born on, neither should kindness. That is the only lesson I carried away from that afternoon, and it has stayed truer to me than almost anything else I learned in all my years among the stars.